Men don't lose their lives in one moment. They lose them in pieces. A year here, a compromise there, and before you know it, they bled out 2 decades without even realizing it. And when they finally wake up, it's not to a triumphant sunrise, but to the horror that their best years were given away for nothing.
Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire group of people is pushed too far? When the weight of constant criticism and blame becomes unbearable? For decades, men have been told they're the problem, shamed for their very existence, and now they've made a choice that's shaking the foundations of society. They've walked away. Stick around until the end of this video, because I'm going to reveal the surprising truth about how men are finding peace in solitude and why this shift is changing everything. You won't want to miss the raw reality we're diving into today. If you're fired up by this kind of hard-hitting truth, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell and select all so you get every single Angry Guy video the moment we drop it. We're bringing you content that cuts through the noise, and you don't want to miss a second of it. Let's keep this movement growing together. Want to take control of your financial future and build real wealth? Check out Angry's Crypto Academy, where we teach you how to protect and safeguard your assets, grow your money, and master the art of buying, selling, and trading crypto. The link is right there in the description, so go check it out now and start building the future you deserve. Knowledge is power, and we're giving you the tools to take charge. If you're loving these Angry Guy videos and want to show some support, you can buy me a Red Bull to keep the energy high. The link's in the description. Every bit helps us keep delivering the content you can't get anywhere else. Let's keep the fire burning. And now let's get into it. For too long, men have been under siege. For decades, society has waged a relentless campaign against them, painting them as the villains in every story, blaming them for every problem, and punishing them for simply being who they are. It started small, with whispers of discontent, but it grew into a deafening roar. Feminism, in its most extreme forms, became a weapon, not for equality, but for division. It told men they were toxic, that their masculinity was a disease, that their presence was a threat. And men listened. They heard the message loud and clear. You're not wanted, you're not needed, go away. So they did. Men walked away, not out of weakness, but out of strength, choosing peace over chaos, solitude over strife. This is the story of how men reclaimed their lives, how they found freedom in turning their backs on a world that turned its back on them first. This is the story of men walking away, and it's a story you need to hear. Picture a man, let's call him John. John's in his 30s, works a steady job, keeps to himself. He's not rich, but he's not broke either. He's the kind of guy who used to believe in the dream, find a good woman, build a family, work hard, and everything would fall into place. But John's not that guy anymore. Over the years, he watched the world change. He saw the women he approached called him creepy for saying hello. He saw his friends dragged through divorce courts, losing everything they'd worked for. He saw social media explode with videos shaming men for sitting a certain way, for daring to exist in public spaces. John saw the writing on the wall, and like millions of other men, he made a choice. He stopped chasing, he stopped dating, he stopped trying to play a game that was rigged against him. John found peace in his own company, in his hobbies and his goals. He's not angry anymore. He's free. And John's not alone. There are millions of Johns out there, men who've said enough is enough, men who've walked away. This movement, this quiet revolution, didn't happen overnight. It's been brewing for decades, fueled by a society that seemed determined to push men to the breaking point. Let's go back 50 years. Feminism started with promises of equality, and at its core, that was a noble idea. Men and women should have the same opportunities, the same rights. But somewhere along the way, the message twisted. It wasn't about equality anymore. It was about supremacy. Men were told they were the enemy, that their instincts, their desires, their very nature was wrong. Words like toxic masculinity became weapons thrown around to shame men for being strong, for being providers, for being protectors. Boys were raised in schools where they were punished for being too rough, too competitive, too boyish. Men were told to sit differently, to speak differently, to suppress who they were, to make others comfortable. And when they didn't comply, they were vilified. Terms like manspreading were invented to criminalize something as simple as sitting naturally. Can you imagine the absurdity of that? A man sitting with his legs apart, minding his own business, suddenly becomes a public enemy. This wasn't about fairness, it was about control. And it didn't stop there. The legal system became a battlefield. Divorce courts, family courts, civil courts, they turned into arenas where men were stripped of their wealth, their children, their dignity. Women were handed the power to destroy men's lives with a single accusation: no evidence required. The Me Too movement, which began with good intentions, spiraled into a witch hunt where a man's reputation could be ruined by a single tweet. Men were fired, ostracized, canceled, all because someone pointed a finger. No due process, no second chances, just guilt by accusation. And while the movement claimed to target predators, it swept up countless innocent men in its net, men who'd done nothing more than flirt awkwardly or misread a signal. The message was clear: men, you're not safe. Step out of line, and you'll be crushed. Then there was the social shaming. Women in gyms, dressed in outfits that left little to the imagination, would pull out their phones and record men for glancing their way. A man dares to look, dares to say hi, and suddenly he's a creep, his face plastered online for the world to judge. Public spaces became minefields. Men couldn't approach women without fear of being labeled a harasser. They couldn't compliment without being called inappropriate. They couldn't even exist without someone finding fault. And when men retreated, when they stopped approaching, stopped engaging, women had the audacity to complain. Social media filled with videos of women crying about being unapproachable, about men not asking them out anymore. They wanted it both ways. Men were wrong for pursuing and wrong for walking away. It's a contradiction so blatant, it's almost laughable, but it's the reality men faced. Let's talk about the dating game, because that's where things really fell apart. Women raised the bar to impossible heights. They demanded expensive dates, luxury dinners, vacations, all while offering nothing in return. Men were expected to pay for everything to prove their worth, while women held all the power. Groups like Are We Dating the Same Guy popped up, where women shared private details about the men they dated, not to protect each other, but to gossip, to shame, to destroy. Apps like the T became platforms for tearing down men's reputations, turning dating into a public spectacle where men were judged and discarded. And then there was the ultimate betrayal: paternity fraud. Women deceiving men about the fatherhood of their children, using men as financial safety nets while offering nothing but lies. Men saw through it. They realized the game wasn't just unfair, it was rigged from the start. So, men walked away. They stopped playing, they stopped dating, stopped pursuing, stopped investing their time and money into relationships that offered nothing but risk. And in that withdrawal, they found something unexpected: peace. Men discovered that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. They learned to value their own company, to invest in themselves, to focus on what truly matters. Hobbies, fitness, careers, passions, these became the new priorities. Men started building lives of simplicity and purpose. They embraced minimalism, not out of necessity, but out of choice. They stripped away the chaos, the drama, the endless demands, and what was left was clarity. Men realized they didn't need women to be happy. They didn't need relationships to feel complete. They found joy in their independence, in their freedom, in their ability to live life on their own terms. This shift didn't just change men, it changed society. Women who'd spent decades pushing men away suddenly noticed the absence. Social media became a stage for their complaints. Videos of women lamenting high inflation, struggling to pay rent, begging men to come back to dating, they're everywhere. They're facing the harsh realities of life without the safety net men once provided. For generations, men stood between women and the brutality of the world. They worked grueling jobs, fought wars, built societies, all to protect and provide. But those days are over. Men are done shielding women from reality. They're done paying for dates, done sending money to cash apps linked in bios, done playing the role of provider in a world that calls them disposable. Women wanted independence and now they have it, along with all the struggles that come with it. And here's the kicker: men aren't suffering. They're thriving. They're keeping their money, their time, their energy. They're resting, focusing on self-preservation, on their own happiness. They're not worried about family expenses or societal expectations. They're living for themselves, and they're finding a kind of peace they never knew was possible. Meanwhile, women are waking up to a world where the rules have changed. They're facing the consequences of their actions, and they're not prepared. As the economy tightens, as life gets harder, women are turning to men, expecting them to step back in to save the day. But men aren't coming back. They've seen the truth, and they're not falling for the same traps again. This is where we are now, a society at a crossroads. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Men have walked away, not out of spite, but out of necessity. They've chosen themselves, and in doing so, they've exposed the flaws in a system that took them for granted. The narrative that women are the ultimate victims, that men are the eternal oppressors, is crumbling. Men are proving through their actions that they don't need to play by society's rules to find fulfillment. They're rewriting the script, and it's a script that doesn't include chaos, manipulation, or endless demands. It's a script about peace, about purpose, about living life on their own terms. But let's not pretend this is just about men versus women. This is about a deeper truth, about what happens when you push people too far, when you take them for granted, when you assume they'll always be there no matter how you treat them. Men have shown that they're not obligated to stay, they're not obligated to endure, they're not obligated to sacrifice themselves for a society that despises them. And that's a lesson everyone needs to learn. Actions have consequences. Words have weight. When you spend decades telling men they're worthless, don't be surprised when they believe you and act accordingly. So, what does this mean for the future? Where do we go from here? The answer isn't simple, but it starts with honesty. Men have found their peace and they're not giving it up. They've learned to trust their own instincts, to rely on observable reality over empty promises. They've seen through the games, the lies, the manipulations, and they're done with it. For women, the path forward is less clear. They're facing a world where the safety nets are gone, where the privileges they once took for granted no longer exist. Some will adapt, some will struggle, but one thing is certain: the old ways are dead. The era of men bending over backward to please, to provide, to protect, it's over. As we move forward, men are redefining what it means to live a good life. They're embracing simplicity, focusing on what brings them joy. They're building communities not based on relationships with women, but on shared interests, shared goals. They're finding brotherhood in gyms, in online forums, in spaces where they can be themselves without judgment. They're rediscovering their passions, whether it's fixing cars, playing video games, or climbing mountains. They're investing in their health, their wealth, their future, and most importantly, they're learning to love themselves, to see their own worth, to reject the narrative that they're only valuable when they're serving someone else. This is the new reality. Men walking away isn't just a trend, it's a movement, it's a statement. It's a declaration that men are done being taken for granted, done being vilified, done being used. They've chosen peace over chaos, freedom over obligation, themselves over everyone else. And in that choice, they're finding something powerful: happiness, not the fleeting kind that comes from external validation, but the deep, lasting kind that comes from knowing who you are and what you're worth. This movement of men walking away isn't just about rejecting relationships or dating, it's about rejecting a system that's been stacked against them for decades. It's about men recognizing their own value and refusing to let society dictate their worth. For too long, men have been conditioned to believe that their purpose lies in serving others, in sacrificing their dreams, their time, their resources for the sake of women, families, or a society that doesn't appreciate them. But now men are waking up. They're seeing the truth that they don't need to live for anyone else to find meaning. They're realizing that happiness doesn't come from meeting someone else's expectations, but from building a life that aligns with their own desires. This is a revolution of self discovery, and it's changing the way men see themselves and the world around them. Let's take a step back and look at how we got here. The past 50 years have been a masterclass in alienation. Society, driven by extreme feminist ideologies, has systematically dismantled the traditional roles that gave men a sense of purpose. Men were once celebrated as providers, protectors, builders. They were the ones who went to war, who worked dangerous jobs, who kept the lights on and the streets safe. But those contributions were erased, replaced with a narrative that painted men as oppressors, as privileged, as inherently flawed. The very qualities that made men valuable, strength, ambition, resilience, were redefined as toxic. Men were told to suppress their instincts, to soften their edges, to become something they're not. And when they tried to comply, they were still criticized. It was a lose lose situation, a trap designed to keep men on the defensive, always apologizing, always second guessing themselves. The media played a massive role in this. Turn on any sitcom from the last few decades, and you'll see the same pattern: the bumbling, incompetent husband, the wise, all knowing wife. Men were portrayed as fools, as obstacles to be overcome, while women were elevated as the moral and intellectual superiors. Commercials, movies, talk shows, they all pushed the same message: men are the problem, women are the solution. This wasn't just entertainment, it was propaganda, seeping into the collective consciousness, shaping how men and women viewed each other. Boys grew up watching their fathers, their uncles, their heroes mocked on screen, their masculinity reduced to a punchline. Girls grew up believing they didn't need men, that men were disposable, that independence meant rejecting everything men had to offer. The result? A generation of men who feel unappreciated, unwanted, and unseen. But it wasn't just the media. The education system became a battleground too. Schools, increasingly dominated by feminist principles, prioritized girls' success at the expense of boys. Programs were created to encourage girls in STEM, in leadership in every field, while boys were left to fend for themselves. Discipline in schools disproportionately targeted boys, punishing them for behaviors that were once seen as normal: roughhousing, speaking out of turn, being energetic. Boys were medicated for being too active, labeled as problems when they didn't fit the mold of quiet compliance. By the time they reached adulthood, many had internalized the message that they were defective, that their natural instincts were wrong. Is it any wonder so many men grew up feeling lost, disconnected, and disillusioned? Then came the workplace. Men who'd once been the backbone of industry found themselves navigating a minefield of new rules. Workplace policies, shaped by the fear of lawsuits and public backlash, cracked down on anything that could be construed as inappropriate. A compliment, a joke, a casual conversation, any of these could end a man's career. Men were told to keep their heads down, to avoid interacting with female colleagues, to protect themselves from accusations. And when accusations did come, they were often believed without question. A man's word meant nothing against a woman's claim, no matter how flimsy the evidence. The Hash Me Too era, while exposing real abuses of power, also created a culture of fear where men were guilty until proven innocent. Good men, honest men, hard-working men saw their lives upended by a single allegation, their reputations destroyed, their families torn apart. The message was clear. Men, you're not safe here either. And let's not forget the family courts. If there's one place where men have been systematically disadvantaged, it's here. Divorce laws, custody battles, alimony, these systems were designed to favor women, often at the expense of fairness. Men watched their friends, their brothers, their fathers lose everything in court: homes, savings, access to their children, all gone, not because they'd done anything wrong, but because the system was rigged. Women could walk away with half a man's wealth, sometimes more, while men were left rebuilding from scratch. Child support payments, often calculated based on outdated formulas, left men financially crippled, working just to survive while seeing their kids a few days a month, if they were lucky. Paternity fraud added insult to injury, with men forced to pay for children who weren't even theirs. The family court system became a symbol of betrayal, proof that society valued women's interests over men's. Faced with this reality, men started to question everything. Why should they keep playing a game they can't win? Why should they keep sacrificing for a society that doesn't value them? Why should they keep chasing relationships that come with so much risk? The answer was simple: they shouldn't. And so they stopped. Men began opting out, not just from dating, but from the entire social contract. They stopped pursuing marriage, stopped chasing promotions in hostile workplaces, stopped trying to meet society's expectations. Instead, they turned inward, focusing on what they could control: their own lives, their own happiness, their own peace. This shift has been profound, and it's visible everywhere you look. Men are embracing minimalism, not because they're broke, but because they've realized they don't need much to be happy. A small apartment, a few possessions, a steady routine, that's enough. They're investing in themselves, hitting the gym, learning new skills, pursuing hobbies they'd put off for years. They're traveling, exploring, rediscovering what it means to live for themselves. Online communities have sprung up, places where men can share their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. These aren't spaces of anger or resentment, though those emotions are part of the journey. They're spaces of support, of brotherhood, of rebuilding. Men are finding strength in each other, in shared experiences, in the knowledge that they're not alone in their choice to walk away. And what about women? How are they responding to this mass exodus? The reaction has been telling. Social media is flooded with women expressing confusion, frustration, even desperation. They're posting videos about how hard it is to find a good man, how dating has become impossible, how men aren't stepping up anymore. They're complaining about the cost of living, about struggling to pay bills, about facing a world that's suddenly much harsher than they expected. Some are begging men to come back, to start dating again, to take on the role of provider once more. Others are doubling down, insisting they don't need men, even as their actions betray their words. The truth is, women are feeling the absence of men in ways they never anticipated. For decades, men were the ones who carried the load, who absorbed the stress, who made life easier in countless unseen ways. Now that they're gone, the weight of reality is hitting hard. But here's the thing: men aren't coming back. They've tasted freedom and they're not giving it up. They've seen what life is like without the constant pressure to perform, to provide, to please. They've discovered that happiness doesn't require a woman's approval, that success doesn't mean a corner office or a big house, that peace is worth more than any fleeting pleasure. Men are building lives that are lean, purposeful, and fulfilling. They're focusing on what matters: health, wealth, personal growth. They're saving their money, not spending it on dates or gifts or alimony. They're resting, not burning themselves out to meet someone else's demands. They're thriving, not just surviving. This isn't to say men are perfect or that they've got it all figured out. Walking away is a journey, and it comes with challenges. Some men struggle with loneliness, with the void left by abandoning old dreams. Some grapple with anger, with the pain of being betrayed by a society they once believed in. But these struggles are part of the process. They're the growing pains of rediscovery, of learning to live for oneself. And as men navigate this path, they're finding tools to cope: meditation, exercise, community, purpose. They're learning that vulnerability isn't weakness, that seeking help isn't failure. They're becoming stronger, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. The broader implications of this movement are staggering. Society as we know it was built on the contributions of men. They were the ones who laid the foundations, who kept the systems running, who took on the hardest, most dangerous tasks. Now that they're stepping back, the cracks are starting to show. Industries that relied on men, construction, manufacturing, tech, are facing labor shortages. Communities that depended on men's volunteer work, their leadership, their generosity, are struggling to fill the gap. Women who once celebrated their independence are finding that independence comes with a price. The safety nets, the privileges, the unspoken support systems, they're disappearing. And as the economy tightens, as resources grow scarce, the absence of men is becoming impossible to ignore. But this isn't about revenge or retribution. Men aren't walking away to punish anyone, they're doing it to save themselves. They've realized that self preservation is not selfishness, that choosing their own happiness is not betrayal. They've learned to trust their own judgment, to rely on facts over feelings, to prioritize reality over rhetoric. They've seen through the illusions, the idea that relationships are the key to happiness, that success means pleasing everyone else, that men are only valuable when they're useful to others. They've rejected those lies and embraced a new truth. Their worth is inherent, their lives are their own, and their peace is non negotiable. So, what does the future hold? For men, it's a future of possibility. They're carving out new paths, redefining success on their own terms. They're building lives that are resilient, adaptable, fulfilling. They're finding joy in the small things: a quiet evening, a good book, a hard workout. They're forming connections, not based on obligation, but on mutual respect and shared values. They're proving that men can thrive without the approval of society, without the validation of women, without the burdens of the past. For women, the future is less certain. Some will rise to the challenge, adapting to a world where they must rely on themselves. Others will struggle, clinging to old expectations, unable to accept the new reality. But one thing is clear: the dynamic has shifted and there's no going back. This movement, this awakening, is bigger than any one person. It's a cultural shift, a turning point in history. Men walking away isn't just a response to decades of mistreatment, it's a reclamation of agency, a declaration of independence. Men are saying loud and clear that they will no longer be taken for granted, that they will no longer sacrifice their lives for a system that despises them. They're choosing themselves, and in doing so, they're rewriting the rules of what it means to be a man in the modern world. As we look ahead, the question isn't whether men will keep walking away, they will. The question is how society will respond. Will it double down on the same failed policies, the same divisive rhetoric? Or will it take a hard look in the mirror and acknowledge the damage it's done? Will it recognize that men are not the enemy, that their contributions are vital, that their well being matters? Only time will tell. But for now, men are doing what they've always done: adapting, surviving, thriving. They're finding their way in a world that tried to break them, and they're doing it on their own terms. This is the story of men walking away, but it's also the story of men rising, rising above the noise, above the chaos, above the expectations, rising to meet their own standards, to live their own truths, to claim their own happiness. It's a story of resilience, of courage, of rediscovery. And it's a story that's only just beginning. Men are walking away, not because they've given up, but because they've chosen to fight for something better: their own peace, their own purpose, their own lives. This story of men rising, of men walking away, isn't just about individuals finding their peace. It's about a collective awakening, a seismic shift in how men view their place in the world. For too long, men have been told their value lies in what they can do for others, in how much they can sacrifice, in how well they can conform to a society that no longer respects them. But now, men are rewriting that narrative. They're rejecting the idea that their worth is tied to their utility, that their lives only matter when they're serving someone else's agenda. Instead, they're embracing a truth that's both simple and profound. Their lives belong to them. This is a movement built on self ownership, on the radical idea that men deserve to live for themselves, to pursue their own happiness, to define success on their own terms. And as this movement grows, it's forcing society to confront some uncomfortable realities about the way it's treated men for decades. Let's zoom in on what this looks like in practice. Picture a guy named Mike, a 28-year-old mechanic living in a small town. Mike's not famous, not rich, not some larger than life figure. He's just a regular guy, the kind you'd pass on the street without a second glance. A few years ago, Mike was all in on the traditional path. He dated, he worked overtime to save for a house, he dreamed of starting a family. But then he started noticing things. The women he dated expected him to pay for everything, dinners, trips, even their phone bills, while offering little in return. When he tried to set boundaries, he was called cheap, controlling, unworthy. At work, he saw colleagues passed over for promotions because of workplace policies favoring women, even when the men were more qualified. On social media, he saw endless posts shaming men for existing, for being too loud, too quiet, too anything. Mike started to feel like he was walking on eggshells, like no matter what he did, it was never enough. So he stopped trying, he quit dating, moved into a modest apartment, and focused on what made him happy: fixing cars, lifting weights, playing guitar. Mike's not bitter. He's content. He's found a rhythm, a purpose, a life that's his own. And Mike's story is playing out millions of times across the globe. This choice, this act of walking away, isn't about giving up, it's about taking control. Men like Mike are realizing they don't need to chase society's approval to feel fulfilled. They don't need a relationship, a big house, or a corner office to prove their worth. They're finding joy in the things they can control: their skills, their health, their time. They're learning that happiness isn't something you find out there in the chaos of dating or the grind of societal expectations. It's something you build piece by piece within yourself. For Mike, that means spending his weekends tinkering with engines, saving his money for a motorcycle, and hanging out with a few close friends who get it. It's not glamorous, but it's real. It's a life stripped of pretense, focused on what matters. And that's the beauty of this movement. It's not about flashy rebellion or loud protests. It's about quiet, deliberate choices, about men reclaiming their agency one decision at a time. But let's not sugarcoat it. Walking away isn't always easy. It's a journey. And like any journey, it has its rough patches. For some men, the transition is liberating from the start. They feel the weight lift the moment they stop chasing relationships or societal validation. But for others, it's a process. There is a grieving period, a letting go of the dreams they were sold, the promises of a life that no longer exists. Men grow up hearing they'll find the one, that hard work and loyalty will lead to a happy family, a white picket fence, a legacy. Letting go of that can feel like losing a part of yourself. It can bring moments of doubt, of loneliness, of wondering if they're making the right choice. But here's what's remarkable: even in those moments, men are finding strength. They're learning to sit with discomfort, to face their emotions head on, to build resilience in ways society never taught them. They're discovering that loneliness is temporary, but peace is lasting. And as they move through this process, they're coming out stronger, clearer, more grounded than ever before. This personal transformation is having ripple effects far beyond individual lives. When millions of men opt out, it changes the fabric of society. Think about the economy. Men have historically been the ones driving consumer spending in certain areas: dating, weddings, family expenses. Now, with men pulling back, those industries are feeling the pinch. Restaurants that relied on date night crowds are seeing fewer reservations. Jewelry stores, florists, event planners, they're all noticing a dip. The wedding industry, once a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut, is grappling with declining marriage rates as men say no thanks to tying the knot. Even the housing market is affected as men choose smaller, more affordable homes over the big family houses they once aspired to. This isn't just a cultural shift, it's an economic one, and it's forcing businesses and policymakers to take notice. Then there's the social impact. Communities that depended on men's contributions, volunteer firefighters, youth coaches, church leaders, are struggling to fill the gaps. Men used to step up, often out of a sense of duty, to keep things running, but now many are saying, why should I? Why should they give their time and energy to a society that doesn't value them? Why should they risk their reputations in a world quick to judge and slow to forgive? The result is a society that's starting to fray at the edges, a world where the absence of men's participation is becoming glaringly obvious. Women who once championed independence are now facing the reality of what that independence entails. Without men to lean on, they're navigating a world that's tougher, more unforgiving, more isolating than they expected. And let's talk about the women's response, because it's a key part of this story. Social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram are flooded with women voicing their frustrations. They're posting about how hard it is to date, how men aren't approaching them anymore, how they're struggling to make ends meet. Some are nostalgic, longing for the days when men were real men, when dating was romantic, when life felt easier. Others are defiant, insisting they don't need men, even as their complaints suggest otherwise. The irony is striking. For decades, women were told they could have it all: career, independence, freedom, without men. Now, as men step back, women are realizing that having it all comes with challenges they weren't prepared for: inflation, rising rents, stagnant wages. These hit everyone hard, but women are feeling the sting acutely, especially without the financial and emotional support men once provided. This isn't about gloating or pointing fingers, it's about cause and effect. Actions have consequences, and the past 50 years of pushing men away have led us here. Women were told they didn't need men, that men were obstacles to their success. They were encouraged to prioritize careers, to, to delay marriage, to see relationships as optional. And many did. They embraced the narrative, built lives around it, only to find that the world isn't as accommodating as they were led to believe. Meanwhile, men who were told they were disposable took the hint. They stopped investing in relationships, stopped playing the provider role, stopped trying to fit into a system that didn't want them. The result is a society where both sides are disconnected, where the old scripts no longer work, where everyone's feeling the strain of a broken dynamic. But here's where the story gets interesting. Men aren't just surviving this shift, they're thriving in it. By walking away, they're discovering a kind of freedom they never knew was possible. They're free from the pressure to perform, to prove themselves, to meet endless expectations. They're free to define success on their own terms, whether that's mastering a craft, building a business, or simply living a life of quiet contentment. They're free to prioritize their health, their passions, their peace, and this freedom is transformative. Men are hitting the gym, not to impress anyone, but to feel strong, to take care of themselves. They're learning new skills, not for a promotion, but for the joy of growth. They're saving their money, not for someone else's dreams, but for their own future. This is what empowerment looks like: not loud declarations or public battles, but steady, intentional choices that build a life of purpose. This empowerment is also changing how men relate to each other. For too long, men were pitted against one another, taught to compete for status, for women, for society's approval. But now, They're coming together not as rivals, but as allies. Online forums, meetups, group chats, these are the new spaces where men are sharing their stories, offering support, building bonds. They're talking about their struggles, their victories, their plans. They're creating communities based on mutual respect, where no one's judged for choosing a different path, whether it's a group of guys lifting weights together, a forum discussing financial independence, or a club restoring old cars. These connections are grounding men, giving them a sense of belonging that doesn't depend on women or society's validation. And what about the critics? Because there are plenty. Some call this movement selfish, claiming men are abandoning their responsibilities, shirking their duties to society. Others label it bitter, accusing men of reacting out of spite or resentment. But these criticisms miss the point. Men aren't walking away to hurt anyone, they're doing it to save themselves. They're not abandoning responsibility, they're redefining it. Responsibility doesn't mean sacrificing your life for a system that doesn't value you. It means taking ownership of your own happiness, your own future, your own choices. As for bitterness, sure, some men start from a place of anger. It's a natural response to being mistreated for decades. But the journey of walking away isn't about staying angry. It's about moving past it, about finding clarity, about building something better. The men who've embraced this path aren't wallowing in resentment. They're too busy living. This movement also challenges the narrative that men need women to be complete. For generations, men were taught that a woman's love, a family, a relationship was the ultimate goal. Without it, they were incomplete, failures less than. But men are proving that wrong. They're showing that fulfillment comes from within, that a man's worth isn't tied to his relationship status. They're living full, rich lives, traveling, creating, exploring, without the need for a partner to validate them. This is a radical shift, one that upends everything society has told us about gender roles, about purpose, about happiness. And it's a shift that's empowering men to be their best selves, not for anyone else, but for themselves. As this movement grows, it's sparking conversations that were once unthinkable. People are starting to question the systems that got us here, the courts, the media, the education system, the workplace. They're asking why men were pushed to the margins, why their contributions were taken for granted, why their struggles were ignored. These questions aren't just academic, they're practical, because when half the population opts out, society feels it. Businesses lose workers, communities lose leaders, economies lose momentum. The absence of men is a wake up call, a chance to rethink how we've structured our world, how we've treated the people who've kept it running. But change won't come easy. The systems that benefit from the status quo, those that profit from division, from men's labor, from women's independence, won't go quietly. They'll push back, doubling down on the same tired narratives, the same accusations of toxicity or privilege. They'll try to shame men back into line, to guilt them into returning to roles that no longer serve them. But men are wiser now. They've seen the game, and they're not playing it anymore. They're trusting their own experiences, their own observations, their own logic. They're building lives that are impervious to shame, lives that don't depend on society's approval. And that's what makes this movement unstoppable. It's not about reacting to the world, it's about creating a new one. So, where does this leave us? For men, it's a time of opportunity, a chance to redefine what it means to live a good life. They're free to explore, to experiment, to find what works for them. Some will choose solitude, others community. Some will focus on wealth, others on experiences, but all of them are united by a common thread, the refusal to be defined by anyone else's expectations. For women, it's a time of reckoning. They're facing a world where the rules have changed, where the support they once took for granted is gone. Some will adapt, finding new ways to thrive. Others will resist, clinging to old ideas, hoping things will go back to the way they were. But the truth is, there's no going back. The world has changed. and everyone's got to figure out how to navigate it. This is the new reality, a world where men are choosing themselves, where society is grappling with the consequences, where the old scripts no longer apply. It's a world of challenges, but also of possibilities. Men are showing that it's possible to live well, to find peace, to be whole, without following the path society laid out for them. They're proving that strength isn't about enduring mistreatment, it's about knowing when to walk away. They're demonstrating that happiness isn't something you chase, it's something you create. And in doing so, they're not just changing their own lives, they're changing the world. This new reality, where men are choosing themselves and rewriting the rules of engagement, isn't just a fleeting trend. It's a fundamental restructuring of how we understand purpose, value, and connection. Men walking away is more than a response to decades of mistreatment. It's a declaration of independence, a refusal to be bound by a system that demands their sacrifice while offering nothing in return. It's a movement rooted in clarity, in the understanding that men's lives are not currency to be spent on society's whims. As men embrace this truth, they're not only transforming their own futures, but also forcing a reckoning in a world that's long taken them for granted. This is a story of empowerment, of resilience, of men finding their way in a landscape that's tried to erase them. And it's a story that's reshaping everything we thought we knew about society. Let's ground this in another story, because stories are how we make sense of the world. Meet Alex, a 35-year-old software developer from a mid-sized city. Alex is the kind of guy who always did what was expected of him. He got good grades, went to college, landed a solid job, and spent his 20s trying to build the life he was told would make him happy. He dated, he proposed to his college sweetheart, he planned for a future with kids and a house in the suburbs. But then it all fell apart. His fiancée left him, citing irreconcilable differences, and the divorce process drained his savings. He saw friends go through similar struggles: false accusations, biased courts, reputations ruined over nothing. At work, he noticed a shift. Promotions went to less qualified colleagues under diversity quotas, and casual conversations with female coworkers became a liability. Social media didn't help, bombarding him with messages that men like him were the problem, that his ambition, his drive, his very existence was somehow wrong. Alex hit a breaking point. He asked himself, why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? The answer was no one. So he changed course. He moved to a smaller apartment, started working remotely, and poured his energy into coding projects he loved. He joined a hiking group, started meditating, and saved his money for travel. Alex isn't chasing the old dream anymore. He's building a new one that's his, and he's never felt more alive. Alex's story isn't unique. It's emblematic of a generation of men who've reached the same conclusion. The system doesn't work for them, so they're opting out. This isn't about running away or hiding, it's about strategic withdrawal, about choosing battles worth fighting. Men like Alex are realizing that the traditional markers of success, marriage, family, a high flying career, come with costs that outweigh the benefits. The risks are too high, the rewards too uncertain. Instead, they're focusing on what they can control: their skills, their health, their peace of mind. They're investing in themselves, not because they're selfish, but because they've learned that no one else will. They're building lives that are sustainable, fulfilling, and resilient, lives that don't depend on external validation or societal approval. This is what freedom looks like: not the absence of responsibility, but the presence of choice. The psychological shift here is profound. For decades, men were conditioned to derive their self-worth from external sources: women's approval, career status, social standing. They were taught that a man's value lies in what he provides, in how much he can endure, in how well he can serve others. But that mindset left men vulnerable, tying their happiness to things they couldn't control. When relationships failed, when jobs disappeared, when society turned its back, men were left with nothing. Now men are flipping the script. They're learning to find worth within themselves, to anchor their identity in their own actions, their own growth, their own principles. This isn't just a coping mechanism, it's a superpower. It's the ability to thrive in a world that's unpredictable, to find stability in chaos, to build a life that's unshakable no matter what comes. This internal transformation is changing how men interact with the world. They're becoming more selective, more intentional, more discerning. They're not saying no to everything, they're saying yes to what matters. A man who's walked away isn't closed off to connection, but he's not desperate for it either. He's not going to jump through hoops for a relationship that doesn't serve him. He's not going to risk his livelihood for a job that doesn't respect him. He's not going to waste his energy on a society that doesn't value him. Instead, he's choosing his path with purpose, aligning his life with his values, surrounding himself with people who lift him up rather than drag him down. This selectivity is a form of strength, a way of protecting his peace while still engaging with the world on his terms. But this shift isn't just personal, it's cultural. When millions of men make these choices, it sends shockwaves through every layer of society. Let's look at the dating landscape because it's one of the most visible battlegrounds. And dating used to be a two-way street, a mutual pursuit where both sides brought something to the table. But over time, it became a one-sided game. Women, empowered by social movements and economic independence, raised their expectations to unrealistic heights. They demanded men meet a laundry list of criteria: tall, wealthy, charming, emotionally available, while offering little in return. Dating apps amplified this, giving women endless options and fostering a culture of disposability where men were judged and discarded in seconds. Men, meanwhile, were expected to bear the costs financially, emotionally, socially. A single misstep could lead to rejection, public shaming, or worse, a ruined reputation. The stakes were high, the rewards uncertain. So men started walking away. They deleted the apps, stopped approaching, stopped investing in a game that was rigged against them. The result? A dating market in crisis. Women are now vocalizing their frustration, posting about the shortage of good men, about how hard it is to find someone willing to commit. But what they're really noticing is the absence of men's effort. Like, men aren't playing the game anymore. They're not lining up to pay for expensive dates, not jumping through hoops for approval, not chasing women who see them as options rather than partners. And this withdrawal is exposing a hard truth. The dating dynamic relied on men's participation, on their willingness to pursue, to provide, to persist. Without that, the system collapses. Women are left competing for a shrinking pool of men, many of whom have opted out entirely. It's a stark reminder that relationships, like any system, require balance, mutual respect, and shared effort, things that have been missing for a long time. This dynamic extends beyond dating to the broader social contract. Men have always been the ones to step up in times of crisis, during wars, disasters, economic hardship. They were the builders, the protectors, the ones who kept society running. But now, men are questioning why they should continue to carry that burden. Why should they risk their lives, their livelihoods, their futures for a society that calls them disposable? Why should they volunteer, lead, sacrifice when their efforts are met with criticism or indifference? The answer is they shouldn't. And so they're stepping back. Volunteer organizations are struggling to recruit men. Civic groups, charities, community projects, they're all feeling the absence. Society is starting to see what happens when the people who've held it together decide they've had enough. The economic implications are just as significant. Men have historically been the backbone of the workforce, taking on the toughest, most dangerous jobs: construction, mining, transportation. But now, many are opting for simpler lives, choosing jobs that offer flexibility and peace over prestige or high pay. Others are leaving the workforce entirely, embracing minimalism or financial independence to live on their own terms. This is creating labor shortages in key industries, driving up cost and slowing growth. At the same time, men's reduced spending on dating, on family, on luxury goods is hitting consumer markets hard. The ripple effects are undeniable. When men walk away, the economy feels it, and the impact is only going to grow as more men choose this path. Women, meanwhile, are grappling with the fallout. For decades, they were told they could thrive without men, that independence was the ultimate goal. But independence isn't just about freedom, it's about responsibility, about facing the world without a safety net. As men withdraw, women are finding that the world is harsher than they expected. Rising costs, stagnant wages, social isolation, these are hitting everyone, but women are feeling the strain in unique ways. Without men to share the load, many are struggling to balance careers, finances, and in personal lives. Social media is filled with their stories. Women lamenting the lack of good men, women struggling to pay rent, women begging for the old dynamics to return. But the old dynamics are gone, and men aren't coming back to fix it. They've learned that their peace is worth more than society's demands, and they're not willing to trade it for anything. This isn't about blame, it's about accountability. Society created this mess by pushing men to the margins, by devaluing their contributions, by demanding everything while giving nothing in return. Women, influenced by decades of messaging, played a role in that push, but they're not the sole architects. The media, the courts, the education system, the workplace, all of these systems work together to alienate men, to make them feel like they had no place. Now society is reaping what it sowed. Men are walking away, not out of spite, but out of necessity, because staying in a system that doesn't value them is no longer an option. And as they walk away, they're showing the world what happens when you take people for granted. They stop showing up. But let's focus on the positive, because this movement isn't just about what men are leaving behind, it's about what they're building. Men are creating lives of purpose, lives that reflect their values, their passions, their dreams. They're rediscovering the joy of simplicity, of living with intention. A man who's walked away doesn't need a mansion or a fancy car to feel successful. He finds success in a morning run, in mastering a new skill, in a quiet evening with a good book. He's not chasing status or approval. He's chasing contentment, and he's finding it in ways society never taught him to look for. This is a revolution of the soul, a reclaiming of what it means to be human, to be whole, to be enough. These men are also building communities not based on competition or hierarchy, but on shared experiences and mutual support. They're forming bonds in gyms, in online groups, in hobby clubs where they can be themselves without judgment. These spaces are where men are healing, where they're learning to trust again, not just in others, but in themselves. They're sharing knowledge about finance, about health, about life, and they're lifting each other up. This isn't the toxic masculinity the media loves to demonize. It's brotherhood, it's camaraderie, it's men helping men navigate a world that's tried to break them. And it's powerful because it's proof that men don't need society's permission to thrive. They can create their own systems, their own rules, their own futures. The critics, of course, will keep criticizing. They'll call this movement immature, selfish, a sign of weakness. They'll say men are giving up on their responsibilities, that they're failing society by choosing themselves. But these criticisms are hollow, rooted in the same entitlement that created this mess. Men aren't obligated to fix a world that's broken them. They're not obligated to serve a society that's dismissed them. They're not obligated to sacrifice their happiness for anyone else's comfort. Responsibility starts with the self, with taking care of your own mind, body, and spirit. And men are doing just that, proving that true strength lies in knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. As we look to the future, the trajectory is clear. This movement is only going to grow. More men will see the truth, will recognize the patterns, will choose to walk away. They'll do it quietly, without fanfare, because that's how real change happens. Not with loud protests, but with steady, deliberate action. And as more men opt out, society will have to adapt. It will have to reckon with the consequences of its choices, with the cost of alienating half its population. It will have to find new ways to function, to thrive, to rebuild. Whether it rises to that challenge remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: men are done waiting for permission to live their lives. They're taking the reins, charting their own course, and they're not looking back. This is a moment of transformation, not just for men, but for everyone. It's a chance to rethink how we've structured our world, how we've defined value, how we've treated each other. Men walking away is a wake up call, a reminder that no one is obligated to stay in a system that doesn't serve them. It's a call to build something better, something fairer, something that recognizes the worth of every individual, not just their utility. For men, it's a call to keep going, to keep choosing themselves, to keep building lives of purpose and peace. Because in the end, that's what this movement is about. Not just walking away, but walking towards something greater, something real, something theirs. This movement of men walking towards something greater isn't just a reaction to the present, it's a response to a long history of shifting expectations and broken promises. It's a reclamation of agency in a world that's tried to strip men of it, a refusal to be defined by a society that's lost its way. Men walking away is a philosophical stand, a declaration that their lives are not tools for others to wield, that their purpose is not to serve, but to exist, to thrive, to create. As men embrace this truth, they're not just changing their own paths, they're challenging the very foundations of a culture that's built on taking them for granted. This is a moment of profound clarity where men are asking not just, what do I want, but why have I been told I don't deserve to ask? The answers are reshaping everything, and they're pointing to a future where men's choices will define the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. To grasp the weight of this moment, let's step back and look at the bigger picture, at the historical currents that brought us here. Men have always been the ones to bear the burdens of society's survival. From the earliest days of human history, they were the hunters, the warriors, the builders, risking their lives to protect and provide. They tamed the wilderness, constructed cities, fought battles, and laid the groundwork for civilization. This wasn't just physical labor. It was a psychological contract, an unspoken agreement that their sacrifices would be valued, that their contributions would earn them respect, a place in the world, a legacy. For centuries, this contract held, imperfectly, but reliably. Men worked, often at great personal cost, because they believed it mattered, because they trusted that society would honor their efforts with stability, family, purpose. But that contract began to erode in the modern era, particularly over the last century. The Industrial Revolution, while bringing progress, shifted the dynamics. Men moved from farms to factories, from communities to urban sprawl, where their individual contributions felt less visible, less meaningful. The rise of consumer culture redefined success, tying it to wealth and status rather than honor or duty. Then came the social upheavals of the 20th century: feminism, civil rights, changing gender roles. These movements, at their best, sought fairness, but they also planted seeds of division. Men who'd been raised to see themselves as providers were suddenly told they were oppressors, that their sacrifices were not just unneeded, but harmful. The very qualities that had defined them, strength, stoicism, ambition, were recast as flaws, as relics of a patriarchal past that needed to be dismantled. By the late 20th century, this narrative had taken hold. Feminism, in its more radical forms, didn't just advocate for women's rights, it vilified men. Media, academia, and politics amplified the message. Men were the problem, women were the solution. Boys grew up in schools that prioritized girls' achievements, where male energy was pathologized, where discipline targeted their natural behaviors. Men entered workplaces where they were seen as potential liabilities, where a wrong word could end a career. They navigated a dating world where they were expected to perform, to pay, to prove themselves while facing rejection or ridicule for trying. The legal system, from family courts to criminal justice, tilted against them, stripping them of wealth, children, and dignity with little recourse. And through it all, the culture screamed, "You're not needed, you're not wanted, you're disposable." Men heard it, internalized it, and began to question why they were still showing up. This historical arc isn't just context, it's the fuel for the movement we're seeing today. Men walking away isn't a tantrum or a whim, it's a rational response to a world that's broken its promises. Men have looked at the deal they were offered: work hard, sacrifice everything, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get respect. And they've said no thanks. They've seen the divorce rates, the biased courts, the social shaming. They've watched their fathers, their brothers, their friends lose everything to a system that doesn't care. They've realized that the old contract, the one their ancestors signed, is null and void. And rather than beg for a new one, they're writing their own terms, terms that prioritize their peace, their purpose, their autonomy. Let's bring this back to the present with another story, because stories ground us in the human cost and triumph of the shift. Meet David, a 42-year-old carpenter from a rural town. David's life followed the script society laid out. He married young, had 2 kids, worked long hours to provide. He was the guy who fixed neighbors' fences for free, coached Little League, showed up for every school event. But when his marriage fell apart, the system turned on him. His ex wife got the house, primary custody, and half his income in alimony and child support. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment, saw his kids every other weekend, and struggled to make ends meet. At work, he faced pressure to keep up with younger, cheaper labor, while workplace policies made him feel like a walking lawsuit. Socially, he felt invisible. Women his age weren't interested, and his old friends had their own families to focus on. David could have given up, could have let the weight crush him. Instead, he chose differently. He started saying no. No to extra hours that didn't pay off. No to relationships that demanded more than they gave. No to a society that expected him to keep giving while taking everything. David rebuilt his life around what he could control. He took up woodworking as a side hustle, started fishing again, joined a men's group at his local gym. He's not rich, but he's free. He's not famous, but he's content. David's story is a testament to the power of walking away, not as defeat, but as victory. David's choice reflects a broader truth. Men are rediscovering their sovereignty. They're realizing that they don't need society's approval to live well, that they don't need a partner to feel whole, that they don't need to follow a script to find meaning. This is a philosophical awakening, one that draws on ancient wisdom even as it navigates modern challenges. Think of the Stoics, who taught that happiness comes from mastering your own mind, from focusing on what you can control and letting go of what you can't. Men today are living that philosophy. They're letting go of society's expectations, of women's demands, of the pressure to be something they're not. They're focusing on their own growth, their own values, their own peace. And in doing so, they're finding a kind of strength that no one can take away. This strength is reshaping how men see themselves and their place in the world. They're no longer defining success by external metrics, money, status, relationships, but by internal ones: clarity, resilience, contentment. A man who's walked away doesn't measure his worth by how many dates he's been on or how big his paycheck is. He measures it by how well he sleeps at night, by how much he enjoys his days, by how aligned his life is with his principles. This shift is liberating because it frees men from the endless chase, the constant need to prove themselves. It allows them to live authentically, to be who they are without apology, to build lives that are true to their deepest desires. But this movement isn't without its critics, and their voices are loud. Some argue that men walking away is a cop out, a refusal to face the challenges of modern life. They claim men are shirking their duties, abandoning families, destabilizing society. Others frame it as bitterness, a petty reaction to rejection or failure. These criticisms, though, are rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding. Men aren't walking away because they can't handle the world. They're walking away because they've seen it for what it is. They've seen the double standards, the rigged systems, the endless demands. They're not abandoning responsibility, they're redefining it. Responsibility doesn't mean sacrificing your life for a society that despises you. It means taking ownership of your own happiness, your own future, your own choices. And as for bitterness, it's true that some men start from a place of anger. Who wouldn't after decades of being devalued? But the journey of walking away is about moving beyond anger, about finding peace, about building something better. The men who've embraced this path aren't sulking, they're thriving. The societal impact of this movement is undeniable, and it's only going to grow. When men opt out, it creates a vacuum. Industries that relied on their labor, communities that depended on their leadership, economies that thrived on their spending, they're all feeling the strain. Women, who've been told they don't need men, are facing the reality of a world without them. Social media is a window into the shift, with women posting about the challenges of single life, the rising cost of living, the loneliness of independence. Some are reflective, acknowledging the role they played in pushing men away. Others are defiant, insisting they're fine on their own, even as their words betray their struggles. This isn't about judgment, it's about reality. Society told women they could have it all without men, and now they're seeing what that looks like. It's a world of freedom, but also of responsibility, of consequences, of hard truths. For men, though, the future is bright, not because it's easy, but because it's theirs. They're building lives that are resilient, adaptable, fulfilling. They're embracing minimalism, not out of necessity, but out of choice, finding joy in simplicity, in the things that truly matter. They're forming communities not based on competition or obligation, but on shared values and mutual support. They're rediscovering their passions, whether it's art, fitness, travel, or learning. They're investing in their health, their wealth, their growth, not for anyone else's approval, but for their own satisfaction. This is what empowerment looks like, not loud proclamations or public battles, but quiet, deliberate choices that build a life of purpose. As we look ahead, the question isn't whether this movement will continue. It will. The question is how society will respond. Will it double down on the same failed narratives, the same divisive rhetoric? Will it try to shame men back into roles that no longer serve them? Or will it take a hard look at itself and ask what went wrong? Will it recognize that men are not the enemy, that their contributions are vital, that their well being matters? The answers will shape the future, but one thing is clear: men are done waiting for society to catch up. They're moving forward, building their own paths, creating their own rules. They're showing the world that strength isn't about enduring mistreatment, it's about knowing when to walk away and where to go next. This movement is also a call to reflection, not just for men, but for everyone. It's a chance to ask what we value, what we've built, what we've lost. For men, it's a reminder to keep choosing themselves, to keep prioritizing their peace, to keep building lives that reflect their worth. For women, it's an opportunity to reassess their expectations, to consider the consequences of their choices, to find new ways to connect in a world that's changed. For society, it's a wake up call to rethink how we treat the people who hold it together, to recognize that no one is obligated to stay in a system that doesn't value them. This is a moment of truth, a chance to build something better, something fairer, something that works for everyone. But let's be real, change won't come without resistance. The systems that benefit from the status quo, those that profit from division, from men's labor, from women's independence, will fight to keep things as they are. They'll push narratives of guilt, of shame, of fear, trying to pull men back into line. They'll paint this movement as dangerous, as destructive, as a threat to progress. But men are wiser now. They've seen through the lies, the manipulations, the empty promises. They've learned to trust their own judgment, to rely on what they see, not what they're told. They've built lives that are strong, not because they're perfect, but because they're theirs. And that strength is what makes this movement unstoppable. So, what does the future hold? For men, it's a future of possibility, of freedom, of self discovery. They're free to define success on their own terms, to pursue what brings them joy, to live without the weight of society's expectations. Some will choose solitude, others community. Some will focus on wealth, others on experiences. But all of them will share a common thread: the refusal to be defined by anyone else's rules. They're proving that men can thrive without the validation of women, without the approval of society, without the burdens of the past. They're showing that happiness is not something you find, it's something you create day by day, choice by choice. For society, the future is less certain. It will have to grapple with the consequences of its choices, with the cost of alienating half its population. It will have to find ways to function without the contributions it once took for granted, to rebuild systems that are fairer, more inclusive, more sustainable. This won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but it's a necessary reckoning, a chance to correct course, to build a world that values everyone, not just those who fit a certain mold. Whether society rises to that challenge is anyone's guess, but men aren't waiting for the answer. They're moving forward, living their lives, writing their own stories. This is the story of men walking away, but it's also the story of men building something new. It's a story of courage, of clarity, of conviction. It's a story about what happens when you stop letting the world define you and start defining yourself. Men are showing us that it's possible to live well, to find peace, to be whole, even in a world that's tried to break you. They're proving that strength isn't about how much you can endure, it's about knowing what's worth enduring. They're demonstrating that the greatest act of rebellion is to live authentically, to choose yourself, to claim your own happiness. And in doing so, they're not just changing their own lives, they're changing the world one step, one choice, one man at a time. This story of men changing the world, one choice at a time, is more than a moment. It's a legacy in the making. Men walking away is a movement that's redefining what it means to live with purpose, to claim your own space, to stand tall in a world that's tried to cut you down. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the power of saying enough and meaning it. As men embrace this path, they're not just rewriting their own stories, they're challenging the very fabric of a society that's relied on their silence, their labor, their sacrifice. This is a movement about truth, about accountability, about the courage to live authentically in a world that demands conformity. And as we close this chapter, it's clear that the journey is far from over. It's just beginning, and its impact will echo for generations. Let's reflect on what this movement means, not just for men, but for everyone. At its core, men walking away is about reclaiming agency, about refusing to let external forces define your worth. For too long, men have been told their value lies in what they can do for others, in how much they can provide, how much they can endure, how well they can fit into a system that doesn't care about them. But now, men are rejecting that lie. They're saying their lives are not currency to be spent, their dreams not bargaining chips to be traded. They're choosing to live for themselves, to pursue what brings them joy, to build lives that reflect their deepest values. This isn't selfishness, it's self respect. It's the understanding that you can't pour from an empty cup, that you can't give your best to the world if you're not at your best. And as men fill their cups, as they find their strength, they're showing the world what it looks like to live with intention, with clarity, with purpose. This movement also holds a mirror up to society, forcing it to confront some hard truths. For decades, men have been pushed to the margins, their contributions devalued, their struggles ignored. The media painted them as villains. The courts stripped them of their rights. The culture shamed them for existing, and yet men kept showing up, working, building, protecting, because that's what they were taught to do. But there's a limit to how much anyone can take, and men have reached it. They've seen the double standards, the rigged games, the endless demands, and they've said no more. By walking away, they're exposing the flaws in a system that took them for granted, a system that assumed they'd always be there no matter how it treated them. This is a wake up call, a chance for society to rethink how it values its people, to recognize that no one is obligated to stay in a place that doesn't respect them. Let's ground this in one final story because stories are how we connect, how we see the human side of this shift. Meet Ryan, a 30-year-old graphic designer from a bustling city. Ryan grew up in the digital age, surrounded by social media, dating apps, and a culture that told him he had to be perfect to be enough. He spent his 20s chasing that perfection, working late to climb the corporate ladder, swiping through endless profiles, trying to meet the expectations of women, bosses, society. But the harder he tried, the more he felt like he was running in place. The women he dated ghosted him after expensive dinners. His job demanded more while offering less. And social media bombarded him with messages that he was toxic, privileged, unworthy. Ryan felt like he was drowning, like no matter what he did, it was never enough. Then, one day, he stopped. He deleted the apps, quit his soul crushing job, and started freelancing. He moved to a quieter neighborhood, picked up photography, and joined a local art collective. Ryan's life isn't perfect, but it's his. He's not chasing anyone's approval anymore. He's creating, exploring, living. Ryan's story is the story of millions of men who found freedom in letting go, who've discovered that peace is worth more than any external reward. Ryan's journey reflects a broader truth. Men walking away isn't about destruction, it's about creation. Men aren't just leaving behind a broken system, they're building something new, something better. They're creating lives that are lean, purposeful, and true. They're forming communities based on shared passions, not competition or obligation. They're rediscovering the joy of simplicity, of focusing on what matters: health, growth, connection. They're proving that you don't need a big house, a fancy car, or a relationship to feel complete. You need a sense of self, a set of values, a reason to get up in the morning. And men are finding those things, not in the chaos of society's expectations, but in the quiet of their own choice. This creative energy is transforming how men see themselves and their potential. They're no longer bound by the old scripts, the ones that said they had to be providers, protectors, performers. They're writing new scripts, ones that allow them to be artists, adventurers, thinkers, dreamers. They're exploring passions they'd put on hold, whether it's painting, hiking, coding, or writing. They're investing in their health, not to impress anyone, but to feel strong, to live long, to enjoy their days. They're saving their money, not for someone else's dreams, but for their own futures. Travel, independence, security. This is what empowerment looks like. Not loud declarations or public battles, but steady, intentional steps toward a life that's yours. These steps are also changing how men connect with each other. For too long, men were taught to see each other as rivals, competing for status, for women, for society's approval. But now, they're coming together as allies, as brothers, as partners in this journey. Online forums, gym groups, hobby clubs, these are the new spaces where men are sharing their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. They're offering support, not judgment, advice, not criticism. They're building bonds based on mutual respect, where no one's valued for what they can provide, but for who they are. This isn't the toxic masculinity the culture loves to demonize. It's camaraderie, it's community, it's men lifting each other up in a world that's tried to tear them down. And it's powerful because it shows that men don't need society's permission to thrive. They can create their own systems, their own support networks, their own futures. The impact of this movement extends far beyond individual lives. It's reshaping the cultural landscape, challenging the narratives that have dominated for decades. The idea that men are the problem, that women are the solution, is crumbling under the weight of reality. Women are seeing the consequences of a world without men's participation: higher costs, fewer resources, greater isolation. Social media is filled with their voices, some lamenting the loss of traditional dynamics, others grappling with the challenges of independence. This isn't about pointing fingers, it's about cause and effect. Society told women they didn't need men, and men listened. They walked away, not to punish anyone, but to protect themselves. And now everyone's feeling the ripple effects, from the economy to relationships to the very structure of our communities. These ripple effects are a call to action, not just for men, but for society as a whole. For men, it's a call to keep going, to keep choosing themselves, to keep building lives of purpose and peace. It's a reminder that their worth is inherent, that their lives are their own, that their happiness is worth fighting for. For women, it's a chance to reflect on their role in this shift, to consider how their expectations and actions have contributed to the current reality. It's an opportunity to build new ways of connecting based on mutual respect and shared effort rather than entitlement or division. For society, it's a challenge to rethink how it treats its people, to recognize that no one is obligated to serve a system that doesn't serve them. This is a moment of truth, a chance to create a world that values everyone, not just those who fit a certain mold. But let's be clear, this change won't come without resistance. The systems that profit from the status quo, those that thrive on division, on men's labor, on women's independence, will push back. They'll try to shame men back into line, to guilt them into returning to roles that no longer serve them. They'll paint this movement as dangerous, as selfish, as a threat to progress. But men are wiser now. They've seen through the manipulations, the double standards, the empty promises. They've learned to trust their own eyes, their own experiences, their own logic. They've built lives that are strong, not because they're perfect, but because they're authentic. And that authenticity is what makes this movement unstoppable. It's not about reacting to the world, it's about creating a new one. As we look to the future, the path forward is both challenging and full of possibility. For men, it's a future of freedom, of self discovery, of living on their own terms. They're free to define success however they choose, whether it's a quiet life of simplicity or a bold pursuit of their dreams. They're free to form connections that uplift them, to pursue passions that ignite them, to build lives that reflect their deepest values. Some will choose solitude, finding peace in their own company. Others will seek community, building bonds with those who share their vision. But all of them will be united by a common thread: the refusal to let anyone else define their worth. This is the legacy of men walking away, not just a rejection of the past, but a bold embrace of the future. For society, the future is less certain, but it's not without hope. The absence of men's participation is a crisis, but it's also an opportunity. It's a chance to rebuild systems that are fairer, more inclusive, more sustainable. It's a chance to value people for who they are, not just what they can do. It's a chance to create a culture that fosters connection rather than division, that rewards effort rather than entitlement, that recognizes the contributions of everyone, not just a select few. Whether society seizes this opportunity remains to be seen, but men aren't waiting for the answer. They're moving forward, living their lives, proving that they can thrive without the validation of a world that's tried to break them. This movement is a testament to the power of choice, to the strength of knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. Men walking away is not about giving up, it's about standing up. It's about saying, I am enough and I will live on my terms. It's about building a life that's true, that's real, that's yours. And as men make these choices, they're not just changing their own lives, they're changing the world. They're showing us what's possible when you stop letting others define you, when you start defining yourself. They're proving that the greatest act of courage is to choose yourself, to claim your own happiness, to walk away from what doesn't serve you and toward what does. This is the story of men walking away, but it's also the story of men rising above the noise, above the chaos, above the expectations, rising to meet their own standards, to live their own truths, to claim their own futures. It's a story of resilience, of redemption, of rebirth. It's a story about what happens when you stop playing a game that's rigged against you and start writing your own rules. Men are doing that day by day, choice by choice, and they're showing the world what it looks like to live with purpose, with peace, with power. This is not the end of their story, it's the beginning. And it's a story that will inspire, challenge, and transform us all. So, what do you think about what we've discussed today? Do you agree with the reasons men are walking away, with the impact it's having, with the future it's creating? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know where you stand. This is a conversation that matters, and your voice is part of it. Share your perspective, your experiences, your ideas. Let's keep this dialogue going because the truth is worth talking about. If you like this video, hit that like button to show some love. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more hard-hitting content that cuts through the noise. And if you think this video is worth sharing, spread the word, send it to someone who needs to hear it. Just remember, all roads lead to MWA, men walking away. Cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.